Prairie Yard and Garden is a production of the University of Minnesota Morris in cooperation with Pioneer Public Television. Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASERA. Mark and Margaret Yackel Jolene, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHill.org.
Each year, right after the new year begins, we start to get seed and plant catalogs. They have so many nice plants that would be fun to try. But if you're like me, you wonder, how would those plants do at my place and in my containers? I'm Mary Holm, and today Prairie Yard and Garden is going to answer my question with a visit to Malmberg's Container Plant Trials. I think most of us love to have flowers in the yard, whether it's using a brick planter, a retaining wall, or containers. Adding flowers can make a yard colorful and inviting, and not just for people, but for butterflies, hummingbirds, and other pollinators too. Today we are going to get lots of great flower and plant ideas from Troy Lucht as we visit his container trial area at Malmberg's Garden Center. Welcome, Troy.
Thank you. Thanks for the chance to show off what we've been working on.
Tell me, how long have you been involved with Malmberg's, and what do you do at your facility?
Well, our facility here is where we start a lot of plants for other greenhouses, but I've been in the family business since I was a small child, so 40-some years that I've been working. And my role really is to manage the whole place and kind of do a lot of production planning.
How long has Malmberg's been producing plants?
Well, Malmberg's was owned by a different gentleman and started back in the 60s that we really started doing geraniums. And then in the 70s, when our family bought it out, we've been doing a lot of geranium production, starter plants of geraniums since the early 80s. Started out as geraniums, and then probably 15 years ago, maybe a little more, the breeders started doing other things that were done by a cutting, a little tip of the plant. And so that now, where geraniums make up about half of what we do, and the rest is all these other new wonderful things.
How did the container trial gardens get started?
Well, again, it started back with geraniums. Back there was a group called the Professional Plant Growers Association, which was a group of greenhouse people, and we started doing a geranium trial, and then we said it was great to see all the new things back when there were only a few new items every year, and then as it started evolving, we said our customers need to see these new things, so we wanted to show them what they look like for the consumer by midsummer. That's an important part. Right now, this trial, there's about 1,000 20-inch pots out here.
Wow.
Well, we pretty much try to have everything that's going to be on our list that we're offering for next season, for spring, for our wholesale customers, our young plant business. But the other thing that we try to do is get the new items, so that we try to get what's coming and going to be brought in next spring so that they can see it perform this summer.
Okay, so they'll actually get to know how it performs right here in the Upper Midwest.
Right. Oftentimes you get a new variety and it might compete with another one, and the other growers will say, well, why should I change, unless you can show them that this is better, or is it just another variety. Sometimes I like to call them, we get tweener colors where it's somewhere between pink and rose. We have sort of, it's not a new color, it's just sort of in between a color.
When do you start your containers?
These are started, we start them in a 4.5-inch square pot in the greenhouse, and then we plant these out here around the first week of June. And we put 7 pots into each one of these 20-inch pots. And most of them have been pinched already in the greenhouse to help them get bigger and more full before we bring them out here.
Then what kind of soil do you use in your containers?
Our soil is what we use in the greenhouse. It's a peat-lite mix with some compost in it. Comes out of Canada. It's our main soil that we use in the greenhouse for all our products. It would be very similar to what you would buy as the potting soil mix that you would get in any garden center.
Okay.
And similarly, what we'll do here is we'll actually add a time-release fertilizer in it, which you can buy in your soils as well, which I would recommend for just about everything that you put in a container, is to put a time release. That doesn't mean you need to stop with Miracle-Gro or any other thing you may do occasionally, but having a time release in there makes a big difference in the performance over the summer.
For your time release fertilizer, do you use something like a 14-14-14, an even blend, or do you use something for promoting more of a bloom, like a bloom booster type?
I would stay more toward the bloom booster, because generally you're going to get more than enough plant. What you want is more flowers. So we generally, it would be, even at a minimum, but generally less nitrogen would be better.
Okay. And then you said that they are also fertilized throughout the season. How often do you do that?
Maybe once every 2 weeks that we might, not very often, but it would be, in a lot of them we don't hit them with that liquid fertilizer. It would be more of those items that are in higher demand of fertilizer.
Okay.
To keep performing, like you said.
Okay.
That are more vigorous, a lot of flowers, or have a susceptibility to turning yellow, so we want to make sure we keep them fed more.
How often do you water these containers?
This year not as much with all the rain we've had, which, you can, on some things you can see the rain has beat them down a little bit, but generally it's almost every day, depends on the item. That's why we also choose the bigger pot, so that we don't have to water as often. So there are other items that are more, are in less need of as much water, or they don't like as much water, then we might water them once or twice a week at the most.
And then how often do you trim or deadhead these containers?
That's probably every couple weeks we'll go through, and it depends on the weather. Like now we need to go through on some of these and clean them up, because we've had some really heavy downpours last week, and that really, things like geraniums kind of takes all the petals off the flowers, and so we'll go through but what we try to do is, we say this is a trial, not a show. And so what we do is try to leave it as natural as possible so that we see the actual performance for the consumer, how this will be, because we know most people don't have the time to do a lot of maintenance on their flowers anymore. So we want it to be a true show or example of what it would perform like at anyone's home.
When you go through and deadhead and trim, how do you do that? Do you use a scissor, or do you have something like a hedge trimmer that you go through, because you have so many here?
Yeah, there's very, very few that we go through with that we would actually go and pinch at this point. Maybe some of the real vigorous coleus, some things like that, we might actually pinch them back, cut them back. But most items, all we're doing is flower removal, and what we'll do there oftentimes is use scissors, or you can do it with your fingers, but we try to break the flower stems off. Rather than take it all the way down to the actual stem where it connects to the plant, we'll break it halfway back. That way you don't get an opening or a wound on the stem where you can allow disease or anything to come in. The plant will automatically kind of abscess on that edge where the flower was coming from, and that'll protect itself, if that made sense. But I would say, especially on geraniums, it's very important that you cut that flower stem off, leave only an inch from the stem, because that way you don't introduce disease like botrytis and other moldy kind of things that people will have late in the season.
How do you decide which planters are going to come under the shade cloth and which plants are going to be out in the full sun?
A lot of that is we look at the ones that can handle the heat more, we'll put out in the sun, or things that are being promoted as full sun, and others that we know like a little bit cooler temperatures or will not do as well in full sun. And even this shade isn't enough for some of those that are more shade loving. So things like fuchsia, this is still a little too bright even with this shade, but it does show you they can perform and survive somewhat even in somewhat of a maybe too high light of a condition. But otherwise we just kind of look at what is their, where should they be grown? Should they be grown kind of on the east side? Should they be grown half-day sun? Then we want to put them under the shade.
You mentioned fuchsias, and do you see that that's a plant that's somewhat decreasing in popularity?
Surprisingly, it isn't. What we're seeing is that people are still looking for some things in shade, and that's an item that we're not seeing decrease as much as I would have expected. We are seeing other items that don't handle the heat particularly well or go out of flower. That's what people are not liking. So some of the things like a bacopa or diascia or nemesias or even osteospermum, we're seeing the sales slowly drop on those because they just don't hold up in the summer. They don't perform or stay in flower as long as people really want them to.
How do you keep fuchsias blooming?
Well, the hardest part with that is having the right spot. You really need a northeast where what you need is probably morning sun at the most, and then that you can keep it in something that's, you get sun but not too much and not too hot. And so even the high temperatures of this summer that we've had for periods of time, they don't like that as much. And so you can see even from our trials that some are flowering better, some are nice green plants with no flowers, but they really need some cooler temperatures to really get back in flower.
And I've noticed too that it seems like you really have to be faithful about picking off the spent blooms too.
Yes, some of the varieties will hold on to the old pods a little bit, and some people like the little decorative purple stems and pods that come on, but as long as you keep those on, you're not going to get reflowering.
When I was walking in, I noticed that you have a lot of petunia trial containers and calibrachoa. What is the difference between those two?
Well, they're very closely related. The calibrachoa are a little smaller flower, smaller leaf, and the petunias generally are just more vigorous than calibrachoas. The other issue that you find with calibrachoas is they are more pH sensitive than a petunia. So a petunia tends to need more fertilizer, but it does okay usually in the upper Midwest here because our well water, the water out of the ground here, tends to be a high pH. And petunias will tolerate that, where you may find in your calibrachoas you're getting yellowing by midsummer. It really is a pH issue. So you really need to do something like a mere acid or whatever it is to drive the pH back down, and then the plant can take up the fertilizer you're giving it.
What is the difference? There are so many different kinds of impatiens too. And what is the difference between a regular impatient and a double impatiens? And then now there's a new one also, well, it's not so new anymore, but called a New Guinea impatiens.
Right. The New Guinea impatiens and the sun patiens, which have come out more recently for more sun-loving, are a completely different breeding line from like the seed impatiens you would buy for shade, and the double impatiens are very much the same. Seed impatiens and the double impatiens are all in the Walleriana genus, and they are susceptible to the downy mildew. So they are very closely related, whereas New Guineas and sun patiens are a whole different line, and they're not susceptible to the downy mildew issue that we've seen in the last few years on impatiens.
What is that like? Because I've heard about that.
Well, what makes it difficult is for people is you plant your impatiens in the spring and they look fine. They look fine all through the summer, and then we'll get either some heat and humidity, and then all of a sudden it comes in and your plant will suddenly all the leaves turn black and will fall off, and you'll just have like a black stem. If you look at the bottom of the leaf, you'll see it looks almost pure white, like it's coated in a pollen almost kind of thing, or spores is really what's on there. And once that's established in those beds, it will keep showing up for anywhere, 5 to 7 years. So it stays in that soil there. So if you plant again, it will show up again.
Since the impatiens can have a disease problem, Are there other plants that you would recommend to plant into the shade?
Yeah, the problem is there's not many that are as showy as impatiens have been and as wonderful and easy to grow. A lot of new begonias are coming in that have bigger flowers, a little better performance you can do in the shade. Coleus is another one that you can do in shade. But as far as some people are using even the New Guinea impatiens, they may not flower as heavy if they have more shade, but they do still perform in the shade, as well as taking a fair amount of sun.
You mentioned Coleus, and they seem to be becoming more popular. Would it be possible to go and see your Coleus trials?
Sure, we can take a look.
When we talk about containers, I've heard the terms thrillers, fillers, and spillers. I definitely think that Coleus would fill the bill as far as a thriller. Is that correct?
Right. Generally with your thrillers, you're looking for something that gives you structure, that'll give you something more in the center and a lot of color. That's why Coleus works well, is because it takes a fair amount of sun or a lot of sun, and you get a lot of color without having to worry about the flowers. And actually on a Coleus, the flower is something you really don't want on the Coleus. So some varieties will not hardly flower at all, and others like this one here, Hurricane Jenny, is we're seeing you can get some small flowers on it. And you can tell by the flowers they're not that significant in color. So what we would suggest is that people pinch those off when they happen. So what you would do is you would reach down from the stem and get down a couple leaves, and then you would just pinch that off. What that does is it promotes all the little branches underneath then will come up and grow, and once they get more sun to them, they'll start to change color like these others, where you get now more of a bright red instead of just the dark red.
I see. So that's what's causing the different coloration here on these leaves, is just the amount of sun exposure.
Exactly. That's what makes the Sun Coleus so interesting, is it's very variable in the sense of how they flower, and others that have more yellow tones at times, like a Pineapple Beauty, if it has too much sun, will almost get too yellow and it looks more harmful, whereas that needs more of a medium sun type setting, or maybe even some shade on it would do best.
Well, there are so many beautiful Coleus around us here, and so many different colors. What are some of these varieties that you find are the most popular and the best sellers?
I would say for best sellers, things like the Hurricane Jenny, Peter's Wonder is another one, Finger Paint. What we find is people like the varieties that are a little more variable in the way they color, and that it's a little more uncertain, but they like rich, vibrant colors is what we're finding.
And do you find that the Coleus are increasing in popularity too?
Yes, we are. Because they're easy to take care of and you get the colors without having to worry about deadheading flowers or anything else. They're very tolerant of whether it's a little more shade or a little more sun. They'll take just about anywhere, and they're really easy to grow. And the thing I would remind people is they're real easy to shape. Don't be afraid to pinch them back, because they grow very quickly.
So is pinching back or for thickness similar to pinching off the flower buds?
Yes, yeah. By doing that, you can, if a plant gets a long branch or something, that just cut that off or pinch it back, and you'd be surprised how quickly it'll grow back from those shoots that are down underneath.
And I would bet that you could do that throughout the season then,
yes,
too.
Anytime. It's just kind of, you can keep the shape as you want it to be.
And if it gets too tall that you're starting to get concerned about wind, especially if you've got a windy place, then if you pinch it, it'll stay more compact.
Correct.
And won't break off.
Right, yeah, because sometimes you'll see with plants when they get big, they actually start to sort of flop open and you don't like the look. But I would suggest, rather than throwing it away, is cut it back, and you'll be surprised. Within 2 weeks, you won't believe how beautiful that plant is. And that can go for whether it's Coleus or petunias and a lot of other things. There's a lot of branching underneath that's just waiting for its chance. And when it has the energy solely to itself, it'll take off.
That's a great suggestion there, too. What are some of the other up-and-coming plants that you see?
What we're seeing is a lot of popularity in plants that are easy to grow, easy to maintain. So we're seeing a lot of growth in Some of the new geraniums that have come out, the interspecifics, where they're a cross between the zonal geranium that we've all known or the ivy geranium. They have incredible performance outdoor for flowering and just real easy to grow. The other are diplodenias or mandavillas, which are more tropical, and they would definitely be an annual here, but they're easy to maintain, easy to grow. It's a type of plant we call at the retail, we call it the cabin plant, so people can leave for the weekend, go to the cabin, and come back, and nobody's had to water it over the weekend, and it loves it.
So it can tolerate some dryness too.
It can tolerate a lot of dryness. The others are portulaca. We're seeing a lot of new varieties in the portulaca. We have new doubles that have come on the market that are large flowered, that are going to be new next year, that will be available next year. So that's one of the new items we do have on our trial here to show people. Another popular area are herbs, and we have a number of them over here I'd like to show you.
Well, that'd be great.
I have a question. What plants do you recommend for starting a butterfly garden?
I'm going to advise a lot of native prairie plants because they're easy to take care of, they're adapted to our climate, and they require a minimum of watering. So we'll start out early in the season. We'll have butterfly weed, which is a milkweed, and that'll get some blooms early in the summer. Then we'll go into Rudbeckias, which are like black-eyed Susan, brown-eyed Susan. That'll get a little later in the season. You want to cover the late summer, early fall, and that's when the butterflies, the monarchs are getting ready to migrate, and they're feeding heavily. And then we'll get asters. There's many varieties of aster, New England aster, smooth aster, sky blue aster. And then the goldenrod, which, like the aster, has many, many varieties, over 100. Stiff goldenrod we can show you. Elm leaf goldenrod is another nice one. Showy goldenrod. And then, the latest members of the sunflower family. I would plant some of those. They'll be late in the season. Just think of the bloom times and try to cover a lot of the seasons so that you can take care of the butterflies when they need the nectar to feed on.
Ask the Arboretum Experts has been brought to you by the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum in Chanhassen, dedicated to enriching lives through the appreciation and knowledge of plants.
These are some of the herbs that we trial. What makes these different than some of what you see in your garden center is these are done by a cutting or a tip instead of by seed. And what we find is by doing it from a cutting, they're more tolerant of the stress of when people are harvesting, when they go out and cut them in their deck and other things. So this one here is called Greek columnar, and it's a very easy growing, easy branching, but very resilient. So you can keep cutting this and it grows really fast to fill back in.
And I would bet that it would be so nice that when you're doing a recipe that needs some fresh basil to just go out and snip some and have it available.
Absolutely. And within that, the basils, there's this one that's a green, there's a variegated one here called Pesto Perpetuo, and we have another one that's an African blue, which is a little more of a decorative one, but it has some of the scent. But that's a variety that really attracts bees.
I can see that. It's just covered with bees over there, so that would be really nice if you're concerned about pollinators. Yes. And want to attract them to your yard.
Yeah, there's a number of things with herbs is they can be used culinary use, or sometimes there's some really nice decorative flower ones as well, and they can give a scent to a combination, and as well as flowering and other things like that. So things like mint, you find people have that oftentimes in a combination, but they can also go out, pick up a few spearmint leaves or mojito mint or some other things, put it in a drink or wherever they may want to use it.
So you could use them to make your own teas?
Absolutely. Some teas, some other more adult beverages could be added with a little bit of fresh mint is another way.
Does this dry well too?
That I'm not sure of. I would assume so. It's really in the basil family. I don't know why it wouldn't.
So you could have a lot of uses if you wanted to use these along in with your containers or a combination container.
Right, and that's the beauty of some of the herbs. You'll notice like this the Greek columnar, this basil is very much an upright, strong grower, upright. So if you wanted to have a bigger pot of mixed herbs, you could have this in the center as your filler, and then the others could kind of trail around it. So a great way to make a nice looking combination using herbs even.
What else do you see as up-and-coming plants, or what do you see in the future as coming out that will be new and interesting for people to try?
Wow, as far as that, I would say the newer things are things that are easy to grow. Like I often, one of my mottos for us is what we choose to grow in our garden center is I want to do products that make our customers successful. Because we want that consumer from the garden center to take it home, be able to grow it and say, I have a green thumb. And because if they failed, it's very easy to give up and think it's you that failed when maybe it's the product that was sold to you wasn't fit for the area that you were trying to sell it or grow it. So I think some of the new things in the geraniums, there's the new interspecifics like the calliopes and others that have really taken the market by storm because of their performance. They flower all the time, but they're easy to grow, very little maintenance.
Can the average person stop in and see your trial? Is this open? Are these containers open for people to come and see?
Oh, absolutely. This is just off from our garden center in Rogers, and so it's an open trial. We invite people to come different times of the year. Even our wholesale customers, we often tell them come early, see what it looks like early, come late, so you see how it performs through the summer. Come after a real hot week, you'll see how it looks at that point.
Okay, so whether you're a wholesale customer or a retail customer, people can stop in and see how these plants are performing.
Absolutely. Now the difference is just because we show all these doesn't mean we necessarily offer all of them in our garden center, because we just can't do all of these things, but we try to pick the best that are showing.
But a lot of times people can find these varieties right out at their local garden center.
Correct.
Because they've come and gotten them from you or from other people, other distributors.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for letting us come and see your 1,000+ containers of plants. This has been a wonderful experience.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm just glad we could showcase all the varieties that are available.
Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASERA. Mark and Margaret Yackel Jolene, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHill.org.